Michael Kelly, House of Cards, the book is closed, the chapters are done. Looking back, what was the story of Doug Stamper?
Oh, God. Complicated, troubled man who I guess never, just unwavering loyalty that ended up costing him everything in the end. Kind of respect it, though.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good way to say it, though. Like, if you think about it, so ultimately what did him in, him being the best he could possibly be at what he did for a living and serving the man he served.
Mm. And I guess, Michael Kelly, what's your story from House of Cards? Like, because like 6, 7 years ago, maybe probably a bit longer, you started that journey. Action was called on the first scene. You've now had cut on the last. What was your journey through that series?
I mean, absolutely life-changing in so many ways. I mean, I have, my daughter is now, she'll be 10, but my son, we started rehearsals right around now, 7 years ago. And come June, which was about a month into filming season 1, my son was born. And so I have a real, a real reference to my life in that span. Obviously, it changed my life so many ways for my career, but also just as a person, the things that this afforded me in life and the journey that I went on with this guy, and over those 7 years, it's been an amazing run. I mean, there was something that felt really good about closing that chapter, especially with such finality to him, but an incredible journey for me. The things that it afforded me as an actor, the jobs that I was offered because of what I had done on House of Cards, the other jobs, the films, the limited series, all of that was a result of playing this guy. So I'm forever indebted to him.
Now, the final season of House of Cards, it was in limbo for a bit. It sort of like you came back under unusual circumstances and everything like that. What was it like when you actually got back to the final season with the cast, with the crew, and came to close out this story?
My God, I mean, there was such a sense of relief and gratitude when we all got back to set. I mean, it was scary because we had a lot to do in a short amount of time, and the writers were under I can't even imagine the pressure they were under. Rewrite your entire season in 2 months. Oh, by the way, you don't have your lead actor. They take a year to do this typically, and I can't imagine what they were under. But there was this sense of like, oh my God, we all overcame this incredible obstacle, and we're doing it. And I give crazy props to MRC and to Netflix for listening to Frank and Melissa, the writers, and me and Rob and the actors, and saying that, like, we gotta do this. Everyone agreed we had to finish it. So I think when we got back, it was just like, holy shit, we're gonna get to finish it, which it meant a lot to us, to get that crew who had been on a long hiatus, to get them back to work. And to finish this story, I mean, it seems like forever ago, but when you think back, that House of Cards was the first original programming streaming for Netflix, and now look at how that landscape has completely changed. To finish it for them, their flagship show, everyone was just like, yeah, let's do it. let's get to work.
Yeah, well, you were really the first like series that had broken through into the Emmys for Netflix. Now they take up like half of the drama series like category now. It's like
it's crazy when you think back. I'll never forget this, and I may have even told you this story before. But sitting there at lunch one day, and David Fincher had shown some of us the rough cut of the first episode, and I was like, wow, like I was like, oh my God, we're really making something special here. And I remember, I think it was Constance Zimmer, might have been Kate Marr, but we were all sitting together for lunch, and she said, "Do you think we'll be eligible for the Emmys?" And one of the girls was like, "I don't know." And I was like, "I don't know. I mean, is it TV? What is it?" So to think that that was only, I guess 7 years is a long time, but 6 years ago, 7 years ago, it's crazy, to think how that whole landscape has changed now.
Mm. And like, I guess just going back to sort of the final season and the circumstances under which you came back, was there a different feeling on set? And especially for you, Michael, coming back on set under those circumstances, and just the final season being quite different from the other seasons of the show too.
Yeah, I mean, look, of course there was. There's no denying the elephant in the room here. I mean, it was certainly a different everything, and difficult in many ways for me to wrap my head around. I mean, if you think about it, like, maybe you could say Rachel Brosnahan, the Rachel character, and I had a lot together. But I mean, come on, I was in almost every scene with that guy for a long time. And then all of a sudden, to not just not be in the scenes, but to not have that person around anymore. It was different. It was almost like going back to a different show, but you had that crew, and you had Robin and the writers and everyone that grounded it for you. So of course it was different, and of course it was challenging. I'm sure far more so for the writers than myself, but I could always count on the writers for giving me incredible material to dive into, so yeah. There's a lot of things.
Yeah. And let's talk a bit about that final season, and particularly how it closes up. So I guess a bit of a spoiler alert for people watching if you haven't caught the end of House of Cards yet. How did you feel when you read that final scene for the first time?
Just, I get on one hand petrified that they were going to end it with me, for the two of us together. I was like, oh God, that's a lot to carry on your shoulders. I don't mean carry the scene. I mean, like, just to be the end of an epic show. But I was prepared before I read it, because we had talked it through so many times. There was many different endings to the show that they went over while we were filming, so I was prepared before I read it. So it was more like when I heard it for the first time, I was like, oh God, scared. I was scared, and that was a heavy scene. And, of course, didn't have enough time to film that final scene. You could always go back and be bummed about certain things, but, also grateful to be given the challenge.
Yeah. And what do you think, like, was the big takeaway from that scene? What do you think, like, what note do you think that House of Cards chose to end on?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, that's probably more of a Frank and Melissa question, but I mean, for me, it's like, it's funny because some people are like, God, why did you have, so many people have so many different opinions about the end of the show. And it's like, well, what is it? Is it that the woman won? And I'm like, yeah, but she wasn't really a good woman at the end. I mean, she was a pretty bad, despicable person herself. And, there's many ways to look at it. It's like, well, evil won, the bad guys won. Yeah, she's a woman, but she stepped on so many women to get there. It's you can almost look at it and be like, I mean, Doug is by no means a good character. There wasn't many great characters. I don't mean great characters. I mean, like, good people on the show, but
there were few angels on House of Cards.
Yeah, few. Few. But and some people, you can argue that Doug was a good person who did some bad things. I just look at him as a really complicated guy. Yeah, he did some horrible things that I would never dream of doing in my life. But at the same time, he was a good person, and I kind of wanted to see him win at the end. That's my ending.
Well, there was talk about there being a Doug Stamper spinoff, and like, not after that final.
Yeah. We went
Yeah.
pretty far down the road on that. It was a really interesting concept too for how they were going to do it. But I kind of like that character had such closure, that I can truly close that. There's no many years later. There's a movie about a series. Sopranos, I think, is doing one now.
Yeah.
My chapter's closed, and it feels kind of good. There's something about like having done the work, having done the job, and officially closing that chapter in my life.
Yeah.
It's something that feels really good.
Unless they do a prequel series, better call Doug.
They better do some miracles with my hair if they plan on doing a prequel.
It's worked for Odenkirk. He's been able to pull it off.
I want to gray and disappear over the 7 seasons.
Also, in the final episode, Doug leans in and he goes, "Never cared to talk to you guys. Why didn't Doug want to talk to us?"
I think because Michael Kelly didn't want to. It's funny. The writers said to both Robin and myself, she's like, "Why do you guys hate the direct address?" And I was like, "I just don't. I don't remember what Robin's answer was, but for me, it was like, I don't feel like it's him. I don't feel like he would care to engage with the audience." And so we sort of came up with this concept was he talking to himself, and was he talking to Frank, to sort of get away from that. And then the one time that he truly does acknowledge the audience, he's like, "No, not for you." And it makes, I just felt like that was more him. I don't, the same way people would be like asking me often, Doug should be president. Doug should run for president. I'm like, no. Can you imagine the guy on the campaign trail? Like, I mean, it's just at a rally, like you can't see him firing up an audience. You can see him intimidating one, but that's not going to get you elected president. In the same way, so the similarities were there for me. I was like, he doesn't care to engage.
What's your favorite moment in the series?
I think if I look back, it's that season 1 when he kills the dog and looks up, and says, "There, no more pain." Like that was just, to me as a viewer, I was like, oh my God, what are we in for? I think it really set up what the whole show was. But for me personally, have to be something with Rachel. I loved it so much. She is consummate professional. We loved working on our stuff together. That whole end of season 2, the desert, when we went out there together, those scenes in the van, like really just diving into it with her. That's probably, for me personally as an actor, the most rewarding work that I got to do on the show. But yeah, I think as a viewer, as a fan of the show myself, that first, when he choked the dog out and looked down the barrel, I was like, oh, that's what we're in for. Even having read it prior, seeing it for the first time was just like, wow. And then to see that come full circle, no more pain, to the end when she says it to me, it was a nice nod to the.
Yeah, it like book ended the series. That sort of that moment. That's really cool. And look in the van, you killed Rachel, and she went on to wonderful things, marvelous things, you would say.
Yes.
Maybe if she'd killed you in the show, you would have had an Emmy winning 7-time Emmy winning series. What's it been like to see her, Rachel Brosnahan, go on and do so well on the awards circuit?
It's incredible, and I'm so happy for her. I mean, she's, I'm sure you've talked to her before. What an amazing woman she is as well. Hard worker. But it was one of those things where I knew, you just knew it. You knew it working with her, and you knew it being around her as a person. You knew where she was headed in life, and to the point when I was with her when we were walking to the table read, and he broke it to her that we were killing her, and she's like, I knew it was coming. it was kind of inevitable. He said, but I'm not worried about you. As much as I'm going to hate to see you go, I know you're going to great places. And she's like, oh, thanks. And we all just kind of looked at each other, and Bo and I were like, you are, like, you just knew it. There are some people you come across in your career where you just know, and she was one of them.
Yeah, well, that was the first season that I spoke with you, Michael. And it was also I spoke to that year about House of Cards in Manhattan, and so like a very strong memory, of that season.
Manhattan. That's right.
Yeah, which she was great in as well, and really fun to see the trajectory of you on that show and her on another show. From that point on. And speaking about these awards circuit and stuff like that, you've had 3 Emmy nominations for House of Cards. What has the awards circuit been like? That whole awards scene for House of Cards?
I mean, it's incredible. You've been to these weekends. It's so much fun. It's that time of year where you get to see a lot of your friends that you only see once a year at these award shows, and so many of them, you become close with them. I mean, Ty Burrell and I go back to Dawn of the Dead, and the only time we really ever see each other is at these award shows. So it's so much fun. And then also just, getting to talk about the work and what you've done and the paths you traveled to get to where you are, and being amongst all of these colleagues that you consider to be people, at the top of their game, doing some really cool work and talking to them about their work. Like it's just I feel grateful to be in the conversations every year, and I feel grateful to be a part of it. It's been a hell of a fun run.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And I've got here the photo, Michael, of us from that year of the Emmys. There we go. There you go. We've got it right there. Last question. What do you miss most about House of Cards?
I think the words. I think getting to say those words, getting to dive into a character so complex on a daily basis, and to live in that world that this guy was that. And actually the solitude I gave myself when I filmed that. I would drive in silence, listening to my lines to Baltimore, which is about a 3-hour drive, 3:15 to my apartment. And I would drive home listening to my lines, or I would just drive in silence, just to sort of ease into it and ease out of it. And when I was there, I've got 2 young kids and a wife. And when I was there working, I made a point to give myself quiet time, not saying a word to anyone, not getting on the phone, not getting on the computer, just being in my apartment. And not to say that I was method and I lived it, but just an hour every day or every other day of nothingness. And I miss that. I miss the peace and solitude of that. It sort of helped me get into that guy's head. I miss that. But I guess more than anything, I'll miss that family that we had, the crew. It was the greatest family. Like, I hugged Gary J, our camera operator, and I remember for that last scene with Robin, like, I had to go to a pretty heavy emotional place at times, and then you turn around and then you're doing coverage of a different part of the scene, and then you got to go back to the heavy emotional part where you're crying. And all I had to do, because it was our last day of filming, was go and give Gary J a hug, and I would just immediately start crying. And he to me is one of those people who I saw every day for half of a year for 6 years, and my heart breaks to think that I don't get to hang out with Gary J again this year when we go back to work. It's the tough part of the business. So that family is really, I'll miss it. I'll miss it a lot. I already do.
Well, Michael, thanks so much for talking to us through all those seasons of House of Cards, and all the best of luck with this year's Emmys. And we'll speak to you again, like with another show or project you're working on and things like that.
Yeah, right on, Matt. Thanks so much, man. It means a lot for you guys to include me in these conversations, and I'm grateful. So thank you.
All right, so it's been great, and we were talking to you from before you got your first nomination, which is always exciting too.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool. Okay, thanks, Michael. Thanks so much.